Grace Miller wiped the grease from her hands as she walked through the massive corridors of her orbital scrapyard station. The station floated high above Velar Prime, a bustling trade world where ships from 100 different species came and went every day. Grace had bought this old station cheap 5 years ago and turned it into her home and workplace. She fixed broken equipment, salvaged useful parts from damaged ships, and sold what she could to passing traders. It was honest work, and Grace liked being alone most of the time. She did not have to deal with the complicated politics of the galaxy or the strange social rules that different alien species followed. Up here in the scrap station, she made her own rules. The morning started like any other. Grace checked her computer for new salvage deliveries and saw that 3 cargo pods had arrived during the night. She grabbed her scanning tools and headed to the receiving bay, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The first 2 pods contained exactly what the manifest said: broken navigation systems from a Centauri freight hauler and damaged hull plating from a mining vessel. Grace marked them for processing and moved to the 3rd pod. This one looked different. The metal was scratched and dented, and someone had welded the standard identification plate completely smooth. Grace frowned. That was odd. Traders usually wanted their cargo tracked properly. She entered the unlock code, and the pod door hissed open. Inside, she expected to find more mechanical parts or maybe damaged equipment. Instead, she found a pile of torn fabric that looked like old blankets. Then the pile moved. Grace jumped back, her hand going to the plasma cutter on her belt. The blankets shifted and she saw scales. Dark red scales that caught the light like polished stone. A small head emerged, with 2 swept-back horns and golden eyes that were much too large and frightened. "Stars above," Grace whispered. "You're a kid." The child was Dragonkin, one of the proud reptilian species that controlled several powerful systems in the Eastern Spiral Arm. Grace had met a few Dragonkin traders before. They were always formal, always proud, and they looked down on most other species as inferior. This child looked nothing like those confident warriors. He was small, maybe equivalent to a human 7 or 8-year-old, and he was terrified. His scales were dull, and Grace could see his ribs through his thin body. "Hey," Grace said softly, putting her tools down and raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." The child did not run. He just stared at her with those huge golden eyes. Grace noticed something else then. Behind him, pressed against his back, were wings. Dragonkin were natural flyers, their wings strong enough to carry them through the air even on high-gravity worlds. But these wings hung limp and twisted. They did not fold properly against his back like they should. Instead, they dragged on the floor of the pod, useless. "Oh, you poor thing," Grace said. She sat down on the floor, making herself smaller and less threatening. "What happened to you?" The child opened his mouth and made a small sound, but it was not words. He tried again, and this time Grace heard broken pieces of Galactic Common, the trade language most species used. "Not wanted," the child said. His voice was rough, like he had been crying. "Broken. They leave." Grace felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. "Someone left you here? On purpose?" The child nodded slowly. He pointed to his wings. "Cannot fly. Dragon must fly." "I am wrong." Grace had heard about this. Some species had rules about children born with disabilities or injuries. In human culture, people worked hard to help children overcome challenges. But she knew that not all species thought the same way. Some saw disability as a sign of weakness that should not be passed on. The Dragonkin were warriors and flyers. A dragon who could not fly would be seen as broken. Useless. "What's your name?" Grace asked gently. The child hesitated. "Ash," he finally said. "They call me Ash. Like dead fire." Grace stood up slowly. "Well, Ash, I'm Grace. And I don't care what anyone else thinks. You're not staying in this cargo pod." She held out her hand. Ash looked at it for a long moment. Dragonkin did not usually touch other species. It was considered beneath them. But Ash was not being treated like Dragonkin anymore, was he? He had been thrown away like garbage. Slowly, carefully, Ash reached out and put his small clawed hand in Grace's palm. Grace helped him stand, and she could see how weak he was. His legs shook and his useless wings dragged behind him. She wanted to carry him, but she sensed that would hurt his pride. Instead, she walked very slowly, letting him lean on her arm as they made their way to her living quarters. The station was big, but Grace only used a small section of it. She had a bedroom, a kitchen area, a workshop, and a common room with a view of the stars. She brought Ash to the common room and helped him sit on the old couch she had salvaged from a passenger ship. "Are you hungry?" Grace asked. Ash nodded quickly. His eyes were locked on her, watching every move like he expected her to change her mind and throw him back in the pod. Grace went to her kitchen and pulled out everything she had that might work for a dragonkin diet. She knew they were carnivores, so she heated up some protein strips and added some nutrient paste that was supposed to work for most species. She brought it back on a tray. Ash ate like he had not seen food in days. He probably had not. Grace watched him and felt that hot anger again. What kind of people would do this to a child? When Ash finished eating, he looked up at her. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why what?" Grace said. "Why help? I am broken. Not useful." Grace sat down next to him on the couch. She thought about how to explain this in simple words he would understand. "Where I come from, on Earth, we don't think like that. When something is broken, we try to fix it. When someone needs help, we help them. That's just what we do." "But I cannot be fixed," Ash said. His voice was flat, like he was stating a simple fact. "Wings are dead. Cannot move. Cannot fly. Dragon must fly." Grace looked at those twisted wings. She was a mechanic and an engineer. She had spent her whole life taking broken things and making them work again. She had fixed engines that people said were impossible to repair. She had rebuilt entire ship systems from spare parts. She looked at Ash's hopeful, frightened face. She thought about what she could do with servos and light alloys. She thought about neural interfaces and power cells. "Maybe you can't be fixed the normal way," Grace said slowly. "But I'm pretty good at finding unusual solutions to problems." Ash tilted his head, confused. "What does that mean?" Grace smiled. "It means you're staying here with me. And we're going to figure this out together. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, Ash, I'm going to help you fly." Ash's golden eyes went wide. "You promise?" "I promise," Grace said firmly. "Now let's get you cleaned up and find you a proper bed. You're safe here. Nobody is going to abandon you again." For the first time since Grace had found him, Ash's expression changed. The fear was still there, but something else appeared too. Something small and fragile but real. "Oh." Grace showed Ash to the small spare room she used for storage. She cleared out the boxes and made up a bed with clean blankets. Ash curled up on it, his broken wings folding awkwardly around him. He was asleep in minutes. Grace stood in the doorway watching him. She had no idea how to help a paralyzed dragonkin child fly. She was not a doctor or a biologist. She was just a mechanic with a scrapyard full of broken ship parts. But she had made a promise. And Grace Miller always kept her promises. She walked to her workshop and pulled up everything she could find about dragonkin physiology. If medicine could not fix Ash's wings, then maybe engineering could. Grace spent the next 3 days reading everything she could find about dragonkin biology. Her computer screen glowed in the dim workshop as she scrolled through medical databases, species profiles, and anatomical charts. Ash slept most of those first days, his small body exhausted from hunger and fear. Grace checked on him every few hours, bringing food and water, but mostly letting him rest. On the 4th day, Ash felt strong enough to leave his room. He found Grace in her workshop, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing dragonkin skeletal structures and muscle diagrams. "What are you doing?" Ash asked quietly from the doorway. Grace looked up and smiled. "Learning about how your wings are supposed to work. Come here if you want. I could use your help." Ash walked slowly into the workshop, his claws clicking on the metal floor. His damaged wings dragged behind him, and Grace noticed he tried to hold them up to keep them from scraping, but they were too heavy for his weak back muscles. Grace pulled up a chair for him. "Can you tell me what happened? How your wings got hurt?" Ash sat down carefully. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the holographic dragon skeleton rotating slowly in the air. "I was born this way," he finally said. "Wings never worked. Never moved right. Healers said the nerves were wrong. Dead inside." Grace nodded, making notes on her data pad. "Did they try to fix it?" "At first," Ash said. "When I was very small. They used medicines and machines. Nothing worked. Then elders said to stop wasting resources. Said I should be left on a death world. My mother." He stopped, his voice breaking. "It's okay," Grace said gently. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." Ash shook his head. "My mother kept me for 6 seasons. Hid me. But clan found out. They said she was weak. Said I made the whole clan look weak. They took me away and put me in the cargo pod. Mother tried to stop them, but—" He looked down at his clawed hands. "I heard her crying when they sealed the door." Grace felt her hands clench into fists. She took a deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry would not help Ash now. "I'm sorry that happened to you. But you're here now and you're safe. Over the next week, Grace contacted every medical facility within 5 systems. She sent scans of Ash's wings to specialists and research hospitals. She explained the situation over and over again. The responses were all the same. A Centauri doctor was the most direct. His blue face filled Grace's communication screen, his expression cold. The wing structure is completely non-functional, he said, looking at the scans. The neural pathways never developed properly. There is no surgical intervention that would help. The child should have been euthanized at birth. It would have been more merciful. Grace's jaw tightened. He's not an it. His name is Ash, and I'm not asking you to kill him. I'm asking you to help him. The doctor's expression did not change. I am helping him by telling you the truth. This child will never fly. Dragonkin culture has the right approach to such cases. It is wasteful to spend resources on defective genetics. I suggest you return him to his people. His people threw him away, Grace said, her voice hard. Then nature will take its course, the doctor said. Good day. The screen went black. Grace slammed her fist on the desk. Ash was sitting in the corner of the workshop, working on a small puzzle Grace had given him. He looked up at the sound. Another no? He asked quietly. Yeah, Grace said. She tried to smile. But we'll find someone. They did not find anyone. A human doctor on a colony world was more sympathetic but just as unhelpful. I'm sorry, Grace, Dr. Sarah Kim said over the video link. I've looked at the scans. The nerve damage is complete. Even if we could regenerate the tissue, there's nothing to connect it to. The neural centers in his brain that should control wing movement never formed. It's like asking someone to move an arm they were never born with. There has to be something, Grace insisted. Dr. Kim shook her head sadly. With current medical technology? No. Maybe in 50 years, if we develop better neural regrowth techniques. But even then. She paused. Grace, I have to ask. Why are you doing this? The Dragonkin clearly don't want this child back. There are facilities that take in abandoned alien children. They could give him a life even if he can't fly. Grace looked over at Ash. He was pretending not to listen, but his large ears were turned toward the conversation. Because I promised him, Grace said simply. And because he deserves better than just survival. After 2 weeks of rejections, Grace sat in her workshop late at night. Ash had gone to bed hours ago. The station was quiet except for the soft hum of the air recyclers and the distant ping of debris bouncing off the hull shields. Grace pulled up the scans of Ash's wings one more time. She had looked at them so many times she had them memorized. The bone structure was perfect, strong and light like all Dragonkin wings. But the muscles were withered, never having been used. The nerves were just dead tissue, carrying no signals from the brain. Medical science said it was impossible to fix. But Grace was not a doctor. She was an engineer. She started sketching on her holographic design pad. Dragon wings worked like bird wings, with powerful muscles pulling on the bone structure to create lift and thrust. The nerves told the muscles when to contract and relax, creating the complex movements needed for flight. If the nerves were dead, they could not carry signals. But nerves were just biological wires, weren't they? They carried electrical impulses from the brain to the muscles. Grace sat up straighter. Electrical impulses. She pulled up specifications for neural interface technology. It was common enough in prosthetic limbs. People who lost arms or legs could get mechanical replacements that connected directly to their nervous systems, reading the brain's intentions and translating them into movement. The technology existed. It was proven. It worked. Grace started designing in earnest now, her fingers flying across the holographic controls. If Ash's brain could not send signals to his wing muscles, maybe she could build a system that could. Not biological muscles but mechanical ones. Servos and actuators that could respond to neural commands. She would need to build an exoskeleton that fit over his existing wing structure. Something light enough that he could lift it, but strong enough to actually generate flight. She would need power cells, control systems, and most importantly, a neural interface that could read his intentions. When Ash thought fly up, the mechanical wings would respond. The design took shape on her screen. It looked crazy. It looked impossible. It looked like exactly the kind of thing people would say could never work. Grace grinned. Those were her favorite kind of projects. She worked through the night, refining the design. She calculated weight ratios and lift coefficients. She modeled stress points and power consumption. By the time the station's artificial dawn lights started to brighten, she had a complete preliminary design. Would work. At least in theory. Ash found her asleep at her workstation the next morning, her head resting on her arms. He climbed up on the chair next to her and looked at the holographic display still floating in the air. It showed a dragonkin child with wings that glowed blue in the wireframe display. The wings were marked with hundreds of tiny components, servo motors and power lines and control circuits. Ash stared at it for a long time. Then he gently shook Grace's shoulder. Grace woke up with a start. What? What time is it? Morning, Ash said. He pointed at the display. What is that? Grace rubbed her eyes and looked at her design. For a moment she wondered if she should tell him. What if it did not work? What if she was giving him false hope? But Ash was looking at her with those big golden eyes, waiting. It's your wings, Grace said quietly. Or it will be mechanical wings that will let you fly. Ash's mouth fell open. You can do that? I don't know, Grace admitted honestly. I've never built anything like this before. It might not work, but I'm going to try. Ash looked back at the holographic display. His damaged wings shifted slightly behind him, an unconscious movement. No one else wanted to help, he said. I know, Grace said. They said I was broken. Not worth fixing. They were wrong, Grace said firmly. She turned to face Ash directly. You're not broken, Ash. Your wings are damaged, yes, but you're still you. You're still valuable. You still deserve to fly. Ash was quiet for a moment. Then he asked in a very small voice, what if it doesn't work? Grace put her hand on his shoulder. Then we'll try something else. And if that doesn't work, we'll try again. I'm not giving up on you. For the second time since Grace had found him, she saw that fragile hope appear in Ash's expression. When do we start? He asked. Grace smiled. Right now. I'm going to need your help with this. You know what flying should feel like even if you've never done it? That's going to be important. Ash sat up straighter. For the first time, someone needed him. Someone thought he had something valuable to offer. I'll help, he said firmly. I'll do whatever you need. Grace pulled up the design again and started explaining how it would work. Ash listened carefully, asking questions and pointing out things that did not look right to his dragon instincts. Outside the workshop window, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, Ash's clan was going about their lives, having forgotten about the broken child they had thrown away. They had no idea that the human mechanic they probably thought was inferior was about to do something their advanced medical science said was impossible. Grace Miller was going to give a paralyzed dragon child wings of steel. Grace started gathering materials the next day. She walked through the massive storage sections of her scrapyard station, pulling parts from salvaged ships and setting aside anything that might be useful. Ash followed her everywhere, his useless wings dragging behind him but his eyes bright with interest. What about this? Ash would ask, pointing at some piece of equipment. Grace would examine it and either add it to her collection or explain why it would not work. Too heavy, she might say. Or wrong voltage. Or sometimes, actually that's perfect. Good eye, Ash. Each time she praised him, Ash would stand a little taller. The first challenge was finding the right material for the wing frame. It needed to be strong enough to support flight but light enough that Ash could actually lift it. Grace tested aluminum alloys, carbon fiber composites, and even some experimental materials from a crashed research vessel. She set up a testing rig in her workshop, mounting different materials and applying stress until they bent or broke. Ash sat nearby watching and learning. Grace explained what she was doing as she worked, and soon Ash started to understand the basic principles of engineering. This one broke too fast, Ash observed as a carbon fiber strut snapped under pressure. Right, Grace agreed. It's light but it's brittle. We need something with more flex. Something that can bend without breaking like real dragon wings. They finally settled on a titanium alloy that had been used in racing ship hulls. It was light, strong and had just enough flexibility. Grace cut and shaped the metal, creating a framework that would fit over Ash's existing wing bones. The work was slow and precise. Grace had to measure Ash's wings carefully, accounting for every curve and angle. She built the frame in sections, testing each piece before moving on to the next. After 2 weeks, she had the basic skeleton of the mechanical wings completed. She called Ash into the workshop to see. Ash stared at the metal framework laid out on Grace's workbench. It looked like wings but made of gleaming silver metal instead of scales and membrane. It's beautiful, he whispered. It's not done yet, Grace said. This is just the bones. Now we need to add the muscles. The servo motors were next. These would replace the biological muscles that should have moved Ash's wings. Grace salvaged microservos from ship control systems, each one small but powerful. She needed dozens of them, positioned precisely to mimic the complex movements of dragon flight. This was where things got complicated. One afternoon, a trader named Kelvin stopped by the station. He was a Rigelian, tall and thin with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. He had sold Grace salvage before and sometimes bought her refurbished equipment. He found Grace in the workshop, surrounded by tiny servo motors and control boards. Ash was helping her sort components by size. "Grace," Kelvin said in his clicking accent. "I heard a strange rumor. Someone said you have a dragonkin child living here. Is this true?" "This is Ash," Grace said without looking up from her work. "Ash, this is Kelvin. He's a regular customer." Kelvin's 4 eyes focused on Ash, then on his damaged wings. "Ah," he said. "I see. And what is all this?" He gestured at the mechanical wings taking shape on the workbench. "A project," Grace said simply. Kelvin moved closer, examining the work. His expression changed from curiosity to disbelief. "You are building mechanical wings? For the child?" "That's right," Grace said. Kelvin made a sound that might have been laughter. Grace, always the optimist. "But this is foolish. Why waste your time and resources on something that nature itself rejected?" Grace's hands stopped moving. She looked up at Kelvin with hard eyes. "Nature didn't reject him. His people did." "Same thing," Kelvin said, waving one of his 4 hands dismissively. "The child cannot fly. It is his biology. You cannot change biology with engineering." "Watch me," Grace said. Kelvin shook his head. "I mean no offense. But dragonkin are meant to fly. This one cannot. That is sad, yes, but it is reality. You should accept it. Perhaps find the child a useful trade that does not require flight. He could work in a warehouse or process data. Why build something that will never work?" Ash had been silent during this exchange, but Grace saw his shoulders slump. He had heard these arguments before from his own people. "Kelvin," Grace said quietly, "I need you to leave now." The Rigelian blinked all 4 eyes. "What?" "But I came to discuss business." "We can discuss business another time. Right now you need to leave my station." Kelvin looked confused, then offended. He left without another word. After he was gone, Grace knelt down next to Ash. "Don't listen to him," she said. "But what if he's right?" Ash asked, his voice small. "What if this doesn't work? What if you're wasting your time?" Grace put her hands on Ash's shoulders. "Ash, listen to me. Do you know how many times people told me I was wasting my time? When I bought this station, everyone said I was crazy. When I said I could rebuild a dead plasma core, they laughed at me. People love to say things are impossible. But impossible just means nobody's figured it out yet." "Really?" Ash asked. "Really," Grace said firmly. "Now come on. We have work to do." But Kelvin was not the only one who mocked the project. Word spread through the small community of traders and travelers who used the station. Some thought it was amusing. Others thought Grace had lost her mind. A Centauri engineer named Rix stopped by specifically to tell Grace why the project would fail. "The power requirements alone are impossible," he said, looking at her calculations. "Those servos will drain any battery you can build in minutes. The child will fall from the sky." Grace had been worried about that too. But she found a solution in an unexpected place. A damaged racing shuttle had come through the station with experimental power cells designed for quick bursts of high-energy output. They were perfect for flight. She showed Rix her modified power system. He examined it, his expression growing thoughtful. He said. "That might actually work. But what about the control system? How will the child command the wings? Dragonflight is not simple. It requires hundreds of tiny adjustments every second." That was the hardest problem. Grace had been working on it for weeks. The neural interface technology existed, but it was usually designed for simple prosthetics. An arm or a leg only moved in a few basic ways. Wings were far more complex. They had to tilt, flex, spread, fold, and make 1,000 tiny adjustments for balance and direction. Grace built a simplified control system first. It had just 4 basic commands: up, down, left, right. She connected it to a test frame and had Ash try to use it. The neural interface was a small device that attached to the back of Ash's neck, reading the electrical signals from his brain. It took 3 attempts to get it positioned correctly and calibrated to Ash's biology. When they finally tested it, nothing happened. Ash tried to think, move wings up, and the mechanical frame just sat there lifeless. "Maybe the connections are wrong," Grace said, checking the wiring. They tried again. Still nothing. "Maybe my brain is broken too," Ash said quietly. "Your brain is fine," Grace insisted. "We just need to figure out how to read it properly." It took another week of adjustments. Grace realized that Ash had never actually used the part of his brain that controlled wings. It existed, but it had never been activated. Teaching him to use it was like teaching someone to wiggle their ears. The ability was there, but finding it took practice. Grace created visualization exercises. Close your eyes, she would tell Ash. Imagine you're standing on a cliff. The wind is blowing. Now imagine spreading your wings to catch the wind. Don't try to move your real wings. Just imagine the feeling. Ash practiced for hours each day. At first, nothing happened. Then, after 5 days of trying, one of the servos twitched. It was tiny, barely a millimeter of movement. But Ash had done it. He had sent a signal from his brain to the mechanical wings. Grace and Ash both stared at the servo for a long moment. Then Ash tried again, focusing hard. The servo moved again, more deliberately this time. I did it, Ash shouted. Grace, I did it. Grace grabbed him in a hug, laughing. You did. You really did. From that moment, progress came faster. Ash practiced controlling the servos, learning to activate different ones and make them work together. It was exhausting mental work, but he never complained. Grace expanded the control system, adding more complex commands. She programmed in safety features and automatic balance adjustments. The mechanical wings grew more sophisticated with each passing week. 3 months after starting the project, Grace had a complete prototype. The wings looked magnificent, a blend of organic curves and mechanical precision. The titanium framework was covered with a lightweight synthetic membrane that Grace had salvaged from a solar sail. The servos were hidden inside the frame, and the whole assembly was painted a deep red to match Ash's scales. Grace attached the wings to Ash's back for the first time. They were held in place by a harness that distributed the weight across his shoulders and spine. The neural interface connected at the base of his skull. How does it feel? Grace asked. Ash flexed his shoulders experimentally. The mechanical wings shifted slightly, responding to his thoughts. Heavy, he admitted. But good. It feels right. Try to spread them, Grace said. Ash closed his eyes and concentrated. Slowly, the mechanical wings began to unfold. The servos hummed softly as they worked, extending the wing membrane out to its full span. It took almost a minute, but the wings spread completely, wide and strong. Ash opened his eyes and looked over his shoulder at his wings. They were not the wings he was born with. They were better. They were wings that worked. Tears ran down his scaled cheeks. Grace, he said, his voice breaking. I have wings. Real wings. Grace felt her own eyes getting wet. Not yet, she said. Right now you can spread them and fold them. But we still need to teach you to fly. When? Ash asked eagerly. Grace smiled. Soon. Very soon. We just need to run some more tests to make sure everything is safe. I'm not letting you jump off anything until I'm absolutely sure these wings will hold you. Ash nodded, but he was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. He practiced folding and unfolding his mechanical wings, getting used to the weight and the sensation of controlling them with his thoughts. Later that night, after Ash had gone to bed, Grace sat in her workshop. She looked at the test data streaming across her screens. The power consumption was good. The servo response time was excellent. The structural integrity was solid. It should work. It had to work. She had promised. Outside the window, ships passed by the station, their running lights glowing in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people thought that what she was doing was impossible. They thought she was wasting her time on a broken child. Grace looked toward Ash's room, where a small dragonkin boy was sleeping with hope in his heart for the first time in his life. Let them think it was impossible. Grace Miller had built a career out of making impossible things work. And this time she was not just fixing a machine. She was fixing a life. Grace spent 2 more weeks running safety tests before she would let Ash attempt actual flight. She checked every servo motor 3 times. She ran power consumption tests until the batteries were nearly dead and then recharged them and ran the tests again. She verified the neural interface connections, tested the emergency shutoff systems, and calculated weight ratios until her eyes hurt from staring at numbers. Ash grew more impatient each day. When can I try? He would ask every morning. Soon, Grace would answer. I need to make sure you'll be safe. I don't care about safe, Ash said one day, his golden eyes flashing with frustration. I want to fly. Grace knelt down to his level. Ash, if these wings fail while you're in the air, you could get badly hurt. I care about keeping you safe. So we test everything twice and then we test it again. Understand? Ash's wings drooped, but he nodded. I understand. Finally, Grace ran out of tests to run. Everything checked out perfectly. The wings responded instantly to Ash's thoughts. The power cells held their charge. The safety systems worked. There were no more excuses to delay. Grace chose the main cargo bay for the first flight test. It was the largest open space on the station, a massive room 3 stories tall and 50 meters across. She cleared out all the salvage and equipment, leaving just open floor space. Then she did something she immediately regretted. She mentioned the test to Kelvin during one of his regular supply runs. Word spread fast. On the morning of the test, Grace found a crowd gathering outside the cargo bay. There were at least 30 beings of various species, all chattering excitedly. Some were traders who stopped at the station regularly. Others were travelers who had heard the news and delayed their departures to watch. "What's all this?" Grace asked Kelvin. The Regellian spread his 4 hands apologetically. "I may have mentioned that today was the test flight. People are curious." "This isn't entertainment," Grace said sharply. "This is serious." Of course, Kelvin said. "But you must admit it is interesting. A human trying to make a broken dragonfly using scrap metal? People want to see if it works." Grace wanted to send them all away, but she knew that would only make things worse. Let them watch. When Ash succeeded, they would all see that he was not broken. If he succeeded, Grace pushed that thought away. He would succeed. The wings worked perfectly in all the tests. She found Ash in her workshop, wearing his wing harness and running through his pre-flight checks. Grace had taught him to verify every connection and system before attempting flight, just like a real pilot. "There's a crowd," Grace warned him. "A lot of people came to watch. If you want to wait until they leave, we can do this another day." Ash looked up at her. "Will they laugh if I fail?" Grace hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Probably. Some of them at least." Ash was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened his shoulders. "I don't care. Let them watch. Let them see." Grace felt a surge of pride. This small dragonkin child had more courage than most adults she knew. They walked to the cargo bay together. The crowd parted to let them through, and Grace heard the whispers starting immediately. "Look how small he is. Those wings are ridiculous. All metal and wires. This is going to be a disaster. I give him 10 seconds before he crashes." Ash heard them too. His steps slowed. Grace put her hand on his shoulder. "Block them out," she said quietly. "It's just you and me in the sky. Nothing else matters." Ash nodded and kept walking. Grace had set up foam padding around the edges of the cargo bay and stacked soft materials in several spots as emergency landing zones. She had also rigged safety cables from the ceiling, though she hoped they would not be needed. "Okay," Grace said, checking Ash's harness one final time. "Remember what we practiced. Start with small movements. Don't try anything fancy. Just focus on staying stable in the air." "I remember," Ash said. His voice was steady, but Grace could see his hands shaking slightly. "The neural interface is active. The power cells are at full charge. All systems are green." Grace checked her handheld monitor one more time. "You're ready?" Ash walked to the center of the cargo bay. The crowd pressed against the safety barriers, watching. Grace saw beings recording on their devices. Some were making bets on how quickly Ash would fall. Grace wanted to throw them all out. But Ash had said he did not care, so she stayed quiet. Ash stood in the center of the open space. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Grace watched the monitor in her hands. The neural interface showed strong, clear signals. Ash was focusing. The mechanical wings began to spread. The servos hummed softly as the titanium frames extended, unfolding the synthetic membrane until the wings were fully open. They looked magnificent, catching the light and gleaming like polished metal. Someone in the crowd laughed. "Look at that. Like a toy." Grace's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Ash opened his eyes. He crouched slightly, preparing. Then he thought the command they had practiced 100 times in simulation. Fly. The wings beat downward with a powerful stroke. Air rushed beneath them, creating lift. Ash's feet left the ground. For one beautiful second he was airborne. Then the balance shifted wrong. Ash tilted sideways, his wings beating frantically but not coordinating properly. He spun in the air and crashed into one of the foam pads Grace had prepared, landing hard on his side. The crowd roared with laughter. "Told you. Waste of time." The human thought she could fix nature. Grace ran to Ash, helping him up. "Are you hurt?" Ash shook his head. His eyes were wide with shock, but there was something else in them too. Excitement. "I flew," he said breathlessly. "Grace, I was in the air. I actually flew." "You crashed," Grace said, checking him for injuries. "But I flew first." Ash insisted. I was flying. I just need to practice the balance. Grace could not help but smile. Okay, let's try again. But take it slower this time. Don't try to go too high. Ash nodded eagerly. He walked back to the center of the bay, ignoring the jeering crowd. Grace saw his determination and felt hope surge in her chest. The second attempt lasted 3 seconds before Ash overcorrected and spun into a different foam pad. The third attempt, he got tangled in his own wings and fell straight down. The fourth attempt, he actually gained altitude but could not figure out how to turn and flew straight into the padded wall. Each time the crowd laughed harder. Each time, Grace helped Ash up and checked the systems. Each time Ash got back up and tried again. Maybe that's enough for today, Grace said after the 7th crash. Ash had a small cut on his forehead and looked exhausted. No, Ash said stubbornly. One more try. Grace looked at him. His scales were scuffed, his wings were dented in 2 places, and he was breathing hard from exertion. But his eyes were blazing with determination. One more, Grace agreed. But if you crash again, we stop and fix the damage before trying tomorrow. Ash nodded. He walked back to the center one more time. The crowd was starting to lose interest. Some beings were already leaving, having seen enough failure to satisfy their curiosity. Ash closed his eyes. Grace watched the neural interface readings. This time they were different. Calmer. More focused. Ash had learned from each crash, and his brain was starting to understand how to control the wings properly. The wings spread. Ash crouched. The wings beat down. He rose into the air, steady and controlled. 2 meters. 3 meters. He was higher than any previous attempt. Then Ash did something Grace had not expected. Instead of fighting the slight tilt that appeared, he went with it. He leaned into the motion, letting it become a gentle turn. His wings adjusted automatically, small servos making tiny corrections to keep him balanced. Ash was flying. Actually flying. He made a slow circle around the cargo bay, his mechanical wings beating in a steady rhythm. The movement was not perfect. It was wobbly and uncertain. But it was real flight. The crowd went silent. Beings stopped laughing and just stared. Ash completed the circle and attempted to land. He came down too fast and stumbled, but Grace was there to catch him before he fell. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ash looked up at Grace with tears streaming down his scaled face. I flew, he whispered. I really flew. Grace pulled him into a tight hug. She was crying too, not caring who saw. You did. You flew. I'm so proud of you. The crowd erupted. But this time it was not laughter. It was cheering. Beings who had come to mock were now applauding. Even Kelvin was clapping all 4 of his hands together, his expression amazed. Incredible, someone shouted. The human did it. The child can fly. Grace ignored them all. She knelt down with Ash, checking him over. How do you feel? Tired, Ash admitted. My shoulders hurt from holding the wings. And my head hurts from concentrating so hard. That's normal, Grace said. You're using muscles and parts of your brain that have never worked before. It will get easier with practice. Can I try again tomorrow? Ash asked eagerly. Grace laughed. Tomorrow you're going to rest. Those wings need some repairs after all those crashes. But yes, we'll practice more. We'll practice until flying feels as natural as walking. Ash hugged her tightly. Thank you, he said. Thank you for not giving up on me. Grace hugged him back, her heart feeling like it might burst. Never, she promised. I will never give up on you. Over the next few weeks, Ash practiced every day. The crashes became less frequent. His flight became smoother and more confident. He learned to turn properly, to gain altitude, to land gracefully. The mechanical wings became like a part of him, responding to his thoughts as naturally as real wings would. Word spread beyond the station. People heard about the human mechanic who built wings for a paralyzed dragon child. Some came from distant systems just to see it with their own eyes. But Grace did not care about the attention. She cared about the joy on Ash's face every time he took flight. She cared about watching him soar through the cargo bay with increasing confidence and skill. 1 month after that first successful flight, Ash could perform aerial maneuvers that would impress any dragonkin pilot. He could hover in place, fly backwards, perform tight turns, and even do a simple barrel roll. Grace stood watching him one evening as he practiced. He was spinning through the air with his wings spread wide, laughing with pure happiness. This was why she had built the wings. Not to prove anything to the galaxy. Not to show off her engineering skills. But to see this child experience the one thing his own people had said was impossible. Ash landed next to her, barely breathing hard anymore. Flying had become easy for him. Grace, he said. Yes. Do you think? He hesitated. Do you think my mother would be proud of me now? Grace felt her throat tighten. She knelt down and looked Ash in the eyes. Ash, your mother loved you even when you couldn't fly. She kept you safe for as long as she could. I think she would be incredibly proud of you. Not because you can fly now, but because you never gave up. Because you kept trying even when everyone said it was impossible. Ash nodded slowly. Then he spread his mechanical wings one more time. I want to fly higher, he said. I want to fly so high that maybe she can see me wherever she is. Then let's make that happen, Grace said. She opened the cargo bay's outer doors, exposing the vast emptiness of space beyond the atmospheric shields. Ash had never flown outside the bay before. It would be dangerous. There was no foam padding out there, no walls to catch him if he fell. But Grace had installed safety features for this exact purpose. A magnetic tether that would catch Ash if he lost control. Beacon systems so they could always find him. Emergency thrusters in the wing harness. Are you ready? Grace asked. Ash looked out at the stars. Then he looked back at Grace and smiled. I'm ready. Together they walked to the edge of the cargo bay. Beyond the shimmer of the atmospheric shield, space waited. Infinite and beautiful. Ash spread his wings of steel and jumped. He fell for just a moment. Then the wings caught the vacuum and Ash flew out into space for the first time, leaving the safety of the station behind. Grace watched him go, her heart in her throat. But Ash did not need her safety measures. He flew with confidence now, his mechanical wings gleaming in the light of distant stars. He soared higher and higher, a small dragonkin child with impossible wings, flying where his own people said he would never go. And Grace stood watching, crying tears of joy, knowing that she had kept her promise. 6 months after Ash's first flight, a massive dragonkin warship appeared near the station. Grace was in her workshop when the proximity alarms went off. She checked her scanners and felt her blood run cold. The ship was a Talon-class cruiser, the kind that dragonkin clans used for military operations and diplomatic missions. Ash, Grace called out. Come here, please. Ash flew into the workshop, his mechanical wings carrying him smoothly through the corridors now. He had gotten so good at flying that he barely walked anymore. What's wrong? Grace showed him the scanner display. There's a dragonkin ship requesting permission to dock. Ash's golden eyes went wide. His wings folded tight against his back in an unconscious defensive gesture. My clan? I don't know, Grace said honestly. But whoever they are, they're here now. We need to be ready. The communication console chimed. Grace answered it and a dragonkin face filled the screen. He was older, with dark green scales and ceremonial markings that indicated high rank. His eyes were hard and cold. I am Elder Forge of Clan Iron Scale, the dragon said in perfect galactic common. I demand to speak with the human called Grace Miller. I'm Grace Miller, Grace said, keeping her voice steady. You have something that belongs to our clan, Elder Forge said. A defective hatchling that was properly disposed of according to our laws. We have come to reclaim him. Grace felt anger flash through her. His name is Ash. And you didn't dispose of him properly. You threw him away to die. That is our right, Elder Forge said coldly. What we do with our own offspring is not your concern, human. Send the hatchling to our ship immediately. No, Grace said. Elder Forge's eyes narrowed. You refuse? I absolutely refuse, Grace said. Ash is under my protection. You abandoned him. You gave up any rights to him when you put him in that cargo pod. We are coming to your station, Elder Forge said. Prepare for our arrival. The screen went black. Grace turned to Ash. He was trembling, his clawed hands clenched into fists. They're going to take me back, he said quietly. Not if I have anything to say about it, Grace said firmly. She contacted the station master, a practical Centauri woman named Administrator Vex. I saw the dragon ship, Vex said when she answered. What do they want? They want Ash, Grace said. They're calling him property of their clan. Vex frowned. That's complicated. Galactic law regarding abandoned children is unclear. Different species have different standards. If the Dragon King claim he's still legally theirs. He's not property, Grace interrupted. He's a child. A person. I understand, Vex said. But I may not have the authority to stop them if they push this legally. The station exists on trade agreements with multiple species, including the Dragonkin clans. If I anger them, it could have consequences. Grace wanted to argue more, but the communication cut off. She looked at Ash. Go to your room and stay there. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. But, Ash started. Please, Grace said. I need to know you're safe while I deal with this. Ash nodded reluctantly and flew to his room. Grace watched him go, then armed herself with the legal documentation she had prepared months ago. She had officially registered Ash as a resident of the station. She had medical records showing his care. She had everything she needed to prove she was his guardian. She hoped it would be enough. Elder Forge arrived with 4 other Dragonkin warriors. They were all large and imposing, their scales gleaming with traditional clan markings. They walked through the station like they owned it, ignoring the stares of other residents. Grace met them in the main docking area. She stood alone, but she stood her ground. Where is the hatchling? Elder Forge demanded. He's safe, Grace said. And he's staying here. You have no authority over clan property, Elder Forge said. He pulled out a data tablet. According to Dragonkin law, defective hatchlings are to be removed from the clan to prevent genetic weakness. This was done properly. The hatchling was expelled. Now we have learned he still lives, and worse, he has been corrupted with mechanical abominations. He must return to face judgment. Judgment for what? Grace asked. For surviving? For learning to fly? For desecrating dragon heritage with your human machinery? One of the other dragons growled. Wings are sacred. What you have done is an insult to everything we are. What I did was give a child a chance to live, Grace said. Something you wouldn't do. Elder Forge's eyes flashed with anger. You know nothing of our ways, human. We are a warrior species. We have survived for millennia by maintaining our strength. Weakness cannot be tolerated. Ash isn't weak, Grace said. He's one of the bravest people I've ever met. He crashed 100 times learning to fly and got up every single time. That's not weakness. That's strength. He flies with metal and wires, Elder Forge said with disgust. That is not true flight. He is not a true dragon. A crowd was gathering now. Word had spread through the station that the Dragonkin elders had arrived. Traders and travelers pressed close, watching the confrontation. Administrator Vex arrived, looking nervous. Elder Forge, she said diplomatically. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. There is nothing to discuss, Elder Forge said. The hatchling comes with us. Now. I won't let you take him, Grace said. You cannot stop us, Elder Forge replied. We are within our legal rights. The hatchling was abandoned according to our laws. We can reclaim him at any time. But you threw him away, Grace protested. You can't have it both ways. Either he's yours and you're responsible for abandoning a child, or he's not yours and you have no claim to him. Elder Forge smiled, but it was not a kind expression. Human law thinks in such simple terms. Dragon law is more nuanced. The hatchling was expelled from the clan, yes. But he is still Dragonkin. He is still subject to our authority. And we say he must face the Council of Elders for his crimes. What crimes? Grace demanded. Accepting corruption, another dragon said. Allowing himself to be altered by inferior species technology. Bringing shame to all Dragonkin by flying with false wings. Grace felt helpless fury rising in her chest. They had thrown Ash away when he could not fly, and now they were angry that he could. There was no logic to it, only cruelty and pride. Let me see him, Elder Forge demanded. Grace wanted to refuse, but Administrator Vex gave her a warning look. If Grace did not cooperate at all, Vex might be forced to side with the dragons to avoid a diplomatic incident. Fine, Grace said. But Ash decides what happens next. Not you. Not me. Him. She led them to Ash's room. She knocked on the door. Ash, it's Grace. The elders want to talk to you. The door opened slowly. Ash stood there, his mechanical wings folded against his back. He looked small and scared, but he stepped out into the corridor. The Dragonkin elders stared at him. Then their eyes fixed on his wings, and Grace saw disgust and anger on their faces. This is even worse than we heard, Elder Forge said. Look at him. Covered in human metal. Abomination. They're not an abomination, Ash said quietly. His voice shook, but he spoke clearly. They're my wings. Grace built them for me. Grace is not Dragonkin, Elder Forge said. She has no right to alter your body with her primitive machinery. You will return to the clan, and these metal things will be removed. And then what? Ash asked. I'll be paralyzed again? Unable to fly? You were never meant to fly, Elder Forge said. That is nature's judgment. You were born defective. That is unfortunate, but it is reality. These false wings are an insult to true dragons everywhere. Other clans are already hearing about this. They mock us. They say Clan Iron Scale has fallen so low that we allow our defects to parade around with mechanical toys. They're not toys, Ash said, and now there was anger in his voice. I can fly. I can do everything any other dragon can do. You can fly with machines, one of the other elders said with contempt. That is not the same thing. A true dragon flies with wings of scale and bone, gifts from our ancestors. What you have are metal scraps cobbled together by a human tinkerer. Grace's hands clenched into fists, but she stayed silent. This had to be Ash's choice. Come with us, Elder Forge said to Ash. Return to the clan. We will find you a proper place. Perhaps in the data archives, or working with the supply clerks. You can have a useful life even without flight. You want me to give up flying? Ash asked. We want you to accept what you are, Elder Forge said. A dragon who cannot truly fly. Stop pretending to be something you are not. Ash looked at Grace. His golden eyes were full of questions. Grace wanted to tell him to stay, to choose her, to reject these cruel people who had thrown him away. But she knew it had to be his decision. What do you want to do, Ash? Grace asked gently. Ash looked back at the elders. Then he looked down at his mechanical wings. His clawed hand touched the titanium frame gently. These wings, Ash said slowly, are the first gift anyone ever gave me. Not because they had to. Not because of duty or clan obligation. But because someone saw me and decided I was worth helping. Worth saving. That human filled your head with sentiment? Elder Forge said dismissively. You are dragonkin. We do not make decisions based on feelings. Then what do you base decisions on? Ash asked. Honor? Strength? Pride. His voice grew stronger. You talk about dragon heritage and sacred wings. But you threw me away when I couldn't live up to your standards. Grace didn't know anything about dragon heritage. She just saw a child who needed help and she helped. Which one of you showed more honor? The elder's expressions grew dark. You dare lecture us about honor? I dare tell the truth, Ash said. He spread his mechanical wings, the servos humming as the titanium frames extended to full span. You say these aren't real wings. But they let me fly. They let me feel the wind. They let me do everything you said was impossible. Maybe they're not made of scales and bone. But they're mine. Grace gave them to me when you gave me nothing but rejection. You are coming with us, Elder Forge said, his voice hard. This is not a request. Yes, it is, Administrator Vex said, stepping forward. She had been listening quietly, but now she spoke with authority. Station law is clear. Any being residing here has the right to refuse forcible removal unless criminal charges are filed. Has this child committed any crimes under galactic law? Elder Forge hesitated. Under dragon law. This is not dragon territory, Vex interrupted. This is a neutral trade station. Galactic law applies here, not clan law. If you want to remove him forcibly, you'll need to file proper legal proceedings. That will take months and require evidence of wrongdoing. Grace felt a surge of gratitude toward Vex. Elder Forge turned his cold gaze to Ash. The choice is yours, hatchling. Come with us now and accept your place in the clan. Or stay here with your mechanical corruption and be forever exiled from your people. You will never be welcome among dragonkin again. Your name will be struck from clan records. You will be as if you never existed. It was a threat designed to terrify a child. To make Ash feel like he was choosing between identity and survival. But Ash had already made his choice. My name is Ash, he said clearly. Grace gave me that name. You only ever called me defect, or hatchling. You never saw me as a person. She did. He looked at Grace and she saw certainty in his eyes. I choose Grace. I choose my family. The words hit Grace like a physical force. Family. Ash had called her family. Elder Forge's expression turned to ice. So be it. You are no longer dragonkin. You are nothing. Clan Ironscale disowns you completely. He turned to Grace. You have made an enemy today, human. We do not forget insults to our honor. Noted, Grace said, her arm around Ash's shoulders. Now get off my station. The elders left, their footsteps heavy with anger. The crowd that had gathered parted to let them through, then erupted in whispers and conversations. Grace didn't care about any of it. She looked down at Ash. Are you okay? Ash nodded. Then he hugged her tightly, his wings wrapping around them both. I'm home, he said simply. Grace hugged him back, feeling tears on her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. You're home. The days after the elders left were quiet at first. Grace worried that Ash might regret his choice, that he might mourn the loss of his clan and his people. But Ash seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I thought I would feel sad," he told Grace one evening as they sat watching the stars through the workshop window. "But I don't. I feel free." "You don't miss them at all?" Grace asked gently. Ash was quiet for a moment, his mechanical wings folded neatly against his back. "I miss my mother sometimes. I wonder if she thinks about me. But the clan?" He shook his head. "They never wanted me. Why should I miss people who saw me as broken?" Grace put her arm around him. "You were never broken, Ash. You just needed different solutions than what they could provide." "That's because they only knew one way to think," Ash said. "But you think differently. You see problems as puzzles. That's what you told me once." Grace smiled. "I did say that, didn't I?" 2 weeks later, Grace filed formal adoption papers with the station authorities. Administrator Vex processed them personally, and for once the bureaucracy moved quickly. Within a month, the documentation was complete. Ash was legally Grace Miller's son. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them. Grace made Ash's favorite meal, and they ate together in the common room. Afterward, Ash flew loops around the cargo bay while Grace watched, her heart full. "I have a real family now," Ash said when he landed. "A mother who chose me. And I have a son who chose me back," Grace said, pulling him into a hug. But their story did not end there. Word had spread through the trading networks about the human mechanic who built wings for a paralyzed dragon child. The story grew with each retelling, becoming something almost legendary. 3 months after the adoption, a Centauri trader named Lynn arrived at the station. She was carrying a small child, a member of her own species with withered legs that could not support her weight. "I heard what you did," Lynn said to Grace, her voice desperate. "I heard you built wings for a dragon child who could not fly. Can you help my daughter walk?" Grace looked at the child in Lynn's arms. The little girl had bright blue skin and large eyes that watched Grace hopefully. "I'm not a doctor," Grace said carefully. "I can't fix her legs." "I know," Lynn said. "But maybe you can build something that helps her move? Like you built wings? Please." "The doctors say nothing can be done. They say I should just accept it. But I can't accept that she'll never run or play or dance." Grace looked at Ash, who had been listening quietly. He stepped forward. "Grace sees puzzles where others see problems," Ash said to Lynn. "If anyone can help, she can." Grace studied the little girl for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll try. I can't promise anything, but I'll try." She built the child a mobility exoskeleton over the next month. It was different from Ash's wings but based on the same principles. Neural interfaces read the girl's intentions, and servo-powered leg braces did what her own muscles could not. When the little girl took her first steps, walking on her own for the first time in her life, her mother cried so hard she could barely stand. "Thank you," Lynn whispered to Grace. "Thank you for seeing her as more than broken." After that, more came. A trader brought his son, a young being whose species needed 4 arms to function properly, but this child had been born with only 2. Grace built mechanical arms that responded to neural commands. A mining family arrived with their daughter, who had been born deaf in a species that communicated primarily through sound. Grace could not restore her hearing, but she built a device that translated sound into vibrations and visual patterns she could understand. Each project was different. Each child had unique needs and challenges. But Grace approached each one the same way she had approached Ash's wings, as a puzzle to be solved, not a problem to be pitted. Ash helped with every project. He had learned so much from working with Grace on his own wings that he could now assist with designs and adjustments. More than that, he could talk to the frightened children and tell them his story. "I was like you," he would say. "Everyone said I was broken and could never fly. But Grace didn't see broken. She saw possible. And now look." He would spread his mechanical wings, the titanium frames gleaming. "Now I fly better than dragons who were born with working wings." The children listened to him with hope in their eyes. Grace's scrapyard station began to change. What had once been just a lonely outpost became something else. A sanctuary. A place where rejected children and desperate parents could come for help. Grace had to expand her workshop. She hired 2 assistants, both engineers who had heard about her work and wanted to be part of it. She set up a proper medical bay for initial assessments. She created a rehabilitation area where children could learn to use their new devices. Administrator Vex supported the transformation. "You're bringing in more traffic than any trading post could," she told Grace. "And more importantly, you're doing something that matters." 1 year after Ash's adoption, the station had helped 43 children. Some stayed for months while Grace built and adjusted their devices. Others came just for consultations and took the designs home to their own engineers. Every child who left did so with something they had not had before: hope. Grace stood in her expanded workshop one evening, looking at the projects in progress. 3 different exoskeletons in various stages of completion. A sensory translation device. A custom mobility chair that could climb stairs. Ash flew in through the door, his wings moving with effortless grace now. He had grown over the past year, his scales brighter and his body stronger. The mechanical wings had been upgraded twice to accommodate his growth. "Grace," he said, "there's a new family here. They have twin girls. Both were born without the ability to swim, but their species lives underwater. Can we help them?" Grace smiled. "We can try. Bring them to assessment bay too. I'll be there in a minute." Ash flew off to help the new arrivals. Grace watched him go, remembering the terrified, broken child she had found in a cargo pod almost 2 years ago. That child was gone. In his place was a confident young dragon who used his own experience to help others. Who had turned his pain into purpose. Grace thought about the dragon elders who had called Ash defective. Who had said he was worthless. Who had thrown him away like garbage. They had been wrong about so many things. Ash was not defective. He was exceptional. His paralyzed wings had not made him weak. They had made him compassionate. They had taught him that being different was not the same as being broken. And Grace had learned something too. She had started this journey just trying to help one scared child. But in doing so, she had discovered her true calling. Not just fixing machines but fixing lives. Not just building devices but building hope. "Grace." A small voice called from the doorway. One of the new twin girls stood there, her aquatic features delicate and frightened. "My sister is scared. Can you talk to her?" "Of course," Grace said, setting down her tools. She followed the child to the assessment bay, where Ash was already showing the other twin his wings and explaining how they worked. The frightened child watched him with wide eyes. "See," Ash was saying. "Grace built these for me when I couldn't fly. And now I can do anything. She can help you too. You'll be able to swim with your family. I promise." Grace knelt down next to the twins. "He's right," she said gently. "We'll figure this out together. That's what we do here. We find solutions." The twins looked at each other, then back at Grace and Ash. Slowly, hope replaced fear in their expressions. Later that night, after the twins and their family had settled into guest quarters, Grace and Ash sat together in the common room. Through the window they could see ships coming and going from the station. Some were traders. But many now were families seeking help. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't found you?" Grace asked. Ash tilted his head thoughtfully. "I would have died in that cargo pod. Or maybe someone would have found me but just sent me to an orphanage somewhere. I would have lived but I never would have flown. And I would still be alone," Grace said quietly. "Just fixing machines, not realizing I could do so much more." "We saved each other," Ash said simply. He leaned against Grace's side, his wings folding comfortably around them both. "You gave me wings. I gave you purpose." Grace put her arm around her son. "You gave me more than purpose, Ash. You gave me family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dragonkin clan still flew with their organic wings, still rejected children who did not meet their standards. Somewhere out there, doctors and specialists still told parents that nothing could be done for their children. But here, on this small scrapyard station, a human mechanic and her dragon son were proving them all wrong. One child at a time. One impossible solution at a time. Grace's workshop had become a place of miracles. Not because of advanced technology or expensive equipment. But because Grace Miller understood something that many in the galaxy did not. There was no such thing as broken. There were only puzzles waiting to be solved. There were only challenges waiting to be overcome. There were only children waiting for someone to see them not as defects, but as possibilities. And with patience, creativity, and love, anything was possible. Even wings of steel for a paralyzed dragon boy. Ash fell asleep against Grace's side, exhausted from helping the new arrivals. Grace looked down at him, at his peaceful face and his magnificent mechanical wings. The dragon elders had called him an abomination. They had said he would never be a true dragon. They were right about one thing. Ash was not a true dragon. He was something better. He was proof that families were not just about blood or species. He was proof that disability was not the same as inability. He was proof that compassion could accomplish what advanced science could not. He was Grace Miller's son. And together they were changing the galaxy, one impossible solution at a time. Grace closed her eyes, feeling complete in a way she never had before. She had spent so many years alone, thinking she was content with just her machines and her solitude. But Ash had taught her something important. The best things she would ever build were not machines. They were relationships. They were hope. They were the future she and Ash were creating together for children who had been told they had no future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New children who needed help. New impossible problems to solve. Grace smiled. She could not wait. Because impossible was just another word for not yet solved. Anne Grace Miller, with her dragon son by her side, was very good at solving the impossible.